They say the worst emergencies always happen at night. For Marcus Reed, it was 11 o'clock on a Monday when his phone lit up with two messages that pulled him in opposite directions. One from his boss at Sterling Tech Solutions. CEO's computer crashed. Emergency. Get there now. The other from Mrs. Chen next door. Sophie's crying for you. She had the nightmare again. 30 seconds to choose between his daughter and a billionaire he'd never met. Standing in his modest Seattle apartment with rain drumming against the windows, Marcus stared at both screens and felt his chest constrict the way it always did when the world demanded more than he could give. Sophie's door was cracked open, warm light spilling into the hallway. He could hear her small, hitching breaths, the sound of a child trying not to cry loud enough to worry her father. 8 years old and already carrying too much weight. Marcus pushed the door wider and found her sitting up in bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit Sarah had given her on her 5th birthday, 3 years and a lifetime ago. "Daddy?" Her voice cracked on the word. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "I'm here, sweetheart. I saw Mommy in my dream. She was calling me, but I couldn't reach her." Marcus pulled her into his arms, feeling the rabbit squash between them, feeling his heart break in all the familiar places. "It was just a dream, Soph, just a dream. But it felt real. What if she needs me?" "Mommy's at peace. She doesn't need anything. She just wants you to be happy and safe." Sophie pulled back, her eyes red-rimmed and searching his face with that unnerving intensity children have when they're looking for lies. "Do you have to go?" His phone buzzed again on the nightstand. "Boss calling now, 3rd time. "I do, but Mrs. Chen is coming over. She'll stay until I get back." "You always come back." "That's what you say." "And I always do." Sophie's lower lip trembled. "Sometimes being a good dad means making the hard choice, not the easy one. I'll be back before you wake up, I promise." The words tasted like ash even as he spoke them. Another promise stacked on top of all the others. Another night choosing duty over presence. Mrs. Chen arrived within 10 minutes, her coat damp from the rain, her face lined with the particular worry that came from knowing too much about loss. She'd lived next door since before Sophie was born, had brought casseroles after Sarah died, had watched Marcus slowly hollow out and then painstakingly rebuild himself into something functional. She asked no questions, just squeezed his shoulder and went to sit with Sophie. The drive to downtown Seattle took 23 minutes through rain-slicked streets in sparse late-night traffic. Marcus kept the radio off, preferring silence to the empty chatter of midnight DJs. His worn laptop bag sat in the passenger seat, the leather cracked at the corners, the zipper sticky from years of use. Inside, tucked into a side pocket, was a photo of Sophie he'd placed there 3 years ago. A reminder of why he took these calls, why he worked nights when necessary, why he'd traded his promising software engineering career for the stability of IT support. 3 years ago, Sarah died in a car crash on I-5. Rain, black ice, wrong place, wrong time. He'd promised her in the hospital, as machines beeped their final warnings, that he'd take care of Sophie no matter what. That meant taking the stable job instead of the risky startup. That meant working nights when necessary. That meant being the parent Sophie could count on, even when it hollowed him out. Kane Enterprises occupied the tallest building in downtown Seattle, all glass and steel reaching toward low clouds. At night, most floors were dark, but the top 5 blazed with light, reminders that some people's work never stopped. Marcus pulled into the parking garage and sat for a moment, rain hammering the roof, gathering himself for whatever crisis waited on the 45th floor. The lobby was empty except for a security guard stationed behind a marble desk, an older man with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every type of emergency this building could produce. He looked up as Marcus approached, taking in the worn jacket and laptop bag with a glance that held no judgment. "You the IT guy?" "Marcus Reed, Sterling Tech." The guard nodded slowly, pulling up something on his computer. "Ms. Kane's expecting you, 45th floor." He paused, then added with careful neutrality, "Good luck, son." Last tech kept her waiting 10 minutes. She banned him from the building. That was 3 days ago. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Noted. She's brilliant. Just doesn't suffer incompetence. Or delays. Or much of anything, really. The guard handed him a temporary access badge. "Elevator on the right. Don't keep her waiting. The elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting, giving Marcus too much time to examine his own reflection during the long ascent. Dark circles under his eyes, hair that needed cutting, the faint lines around his mouth that hadn't been there before Sarah died. He looked tired because he was tired, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep never quite fixed. Single parenting burned through energy like wildfire through dry grass. He adjusted his laptop bag and thought about Sophie's drawing taped to their refrigerator. She'd made it a week ago. Their family, two figures holding hands, smiling. Just two. Always just two. Sometimes she drew a third figure in light pencil, barely visible, a ghost she couldn't fully commit to making real. Marcus didn't know if that ghost was Sarah's memory or a space waiting to be filled. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open to reveal a hallway lined with black glass walls that turned his reflection into something darker, more official than he felt. Recessed lighting cast everything in cool blue. The air smelled faintly of expensive carpet and the particular silence that came with real power. He followed the signs to the executive suite, his footsteps muffled, carrying his laptop bag like a shield. Through glass walls, he could see empty conference rooms, darkened offices, the occasional glow of a computer left running. The building felt like a sleeping giant, and he was walking through its dreams. Nina Torres met him outside the CEO's office, appearing so suddenly he nearly startled. She was young, maybe early 30s, dressed in clothes that suggested she'd been here since morning and hadn't yet considered leaving. Her expression held the particular exhaustion of someone whose job was managing impossible demands. You're the tech, not a question. Marcus Reed. She's inside, computer won't boot, third crash this week. Board meeting with Tokyo in 6 hours. Nina's voice carried no hostility, just flat statement of fact. Please fix it fast. I'll do my best. Nina studied him for a moment, something shifting in her expression. She's not as scary as people say, just focused and tired and carrying more than anyone should have to. Then, as if catching herself being too human, she straightened. Don't screw this up. She left, heels clicking down the hallway, leaving Marcus alone outside the office door. Through the glass wall, he could see an empty desk, warm lighting that contradicted everything he'd expected. He took a breath and knocked, but no one answered. The door was open. Victoria Kane's office surprised him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Instead of the cold, intimidating space he'd imagined, the room felt almost warm. Soft lighting from floor lamps rather than harsh overheads. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Seattle's nighttime sprawl, rain streaking the glass, city lights reflected in water. The desk was sleek and organized, everything in its place except for a small, potted plant near the window that was clearly dying, its leaves brown at the edges, soil dry. Someone had forgotten to water it. Someone who probably forgot to do a lot of things for herself. Marcus set his bag down and approached the desk. The computer sat dark, unresponsive to his first attempts at revival. He powered it on and watched the boot sequence begin, then stall, then fail. Classic symptoms, probably corrupted system files. 15 years of experience led him diagnosed by sound alone. The particular whir and click that meant hardware was fine, but software had eaten itself. He pulled up the diagnostic interface and began running through protocols, fingers moving automatically across the keyboard. This was where his mind went quiet, where the grief and guilt and constant low-grade anxiety about Sophie receded into background noise. Technical problems had solutions, clear, logical, fixable solutions. Life didn't work that way, but computers did. The system attempted a reboot, progress bar climbing. Then, without warning, a window opened on screen. Preview mode, photo library, accessing files he had no business seeing. It happened sometimes with corrupted boot sequences, the computer trying to load everything at once, spilling digital contents like an overturned purse. One image filled the screen for perhaps 3 seconds before the system crashed again. A woman sitting on a dock by a lake, mountains blue-green in the distance. Lake Tahoe probably, given the distinctive clarity of the water. She wore an oversized gray sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders, dark and slightly windblown. She wasn't posing, wasn't even looking at the camera, just sitting with her feet dangling over the water, arms wrapped around her knees, expression soft and distant and completely unguarded. Marcus recognized Victoria Kane from business news, from the occasional headline about tech sector shakeups, from the professional headshots that made her look polished and untouchable. But this version, this woman by the lake who'd forgotten to perform for anyone, he'd never seen her before. The screen went black. System dead again. He sat there staring at nothing, trying to unsee what he'd just seen, knowing it was too late. The image had imprinted itself, the softness around her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward like she was holding something precious, the absolute absence of the armor she must wear everywhere else. Footsteps behind him, soft but purposeful. Marcus turned as Victoria Kane walked into her office, and everything about her was different from the photograph. She moved with the kind of precision that came from years of conscious control, each gesture measured, each expression carefully calibrated. Black suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, hair pulled into a tight bun, posture that could cut glass. But she had the same dark circles under her eyes that he did, the same faint lines of exhaustion around her mouth. She carried a tablet in one hand and the weight of the entire building on her shoulders. Her eyes landed on him, then the dark computer screen, then his face again with an intensity that made him want to step backward. Is it fixed? Working on it, systems attempting reboot, should know more in a minute. She set the tablet on her desk with precise care and studied him. Not hostile, exactly, just focused in a way that felt like standing under a spotlight. You're not the usual tech. Sterling Tech sent their senior specialist, given the urgency. And your name? Marcus Reed. How long have you been sitting here, Marcus Reed? His throat went dry. About 10 minutes. Looking at my computer. It wasn't a question, and lying would only make it worse. Running diagnostics. The preview window opened automatically during the boot sequence. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, a tightening of tension. What did you see? The question landed like a physical thing. He could deflect, could claim he saw nothing, could retreat behind professional protocol. But something in her voice, a thread of something raw and almost vulnerable, made him choose truth instead. A photo. It appeared for maybe 3 seconds before the system crashed again. I didn't go looking for it. Victoria moved closer and he caught the faint scent of expensive perfume and the particular exhaustion smell that came from too many hours without rest. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'5", but she seemed to fill more space than her physical form should allow. Describe it. Miss Kane, I really don't think... Describe it. Firm now, but not angry. Something else he couldn't quite identify. Marcus exhaled slowly. You were by a lake. Tahoe looked like. Sitting on a dock. You weren't posing for anyone. And you looked... He searched for the right word, knowing whatever he said next mattered more than fixing her computer. Free. You looked free. Victoria stood very still for a long moment. Then she walked to the window, arms folding across her chest, staring out at rain and reflected light. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. That photo was taken 2 years ago. Lake Tahoe, my sister's birthday weekend. The only vacation I've taken in 5 years. Rain drummed against the glass, filling the silence. I'd promised myself I'd go back, make time for trips like that, for being someone other than this. She gestured vaguely at the office, the building, the empire she'd constructed. I never did. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. The computer behind him chimed, signaling a successful boot. He turned back to it, grateful for something concrete to focus on. Files loaded, system stabilized, desktop appearing with all its organized folders and strategic documents. You should be good now. The startup files were corrupted. I've repaired them and set the system to do a full diagnostic on shutdown to catch any other issues. Thank you. She didn't turn from the window. He began packing his laptop bag, aware that he should leave, that he'd completed the job, that staying longer would only complicate an already complicated moment. But she stood there looking so profoundly alone in her glass tower that leaving felt wrong. Miss Kane? She turned, and for just a second, her expression was completely unguarded. Then the mask slid back into place, CEO armor reforming. Can I ask you something? Her voice carried an edge of uncertainty he suspected she rarely let show. Of course. When you saw that photo, what did you think? Think about what? She took a breath, and he watched her gathering courage for whatever came next. Did I look happy? The question hung in the air between them, vulnerable and exposed in a way that made his chest tighten. This wasn't about technology anymore. Maybe it never had been. You looked at peace, Marcus said carefully. Victoria's eyes held his, searching. That's not the same thing. No, but sometimes peace is harder to find than happiness. Something in her expression cracked, just slightly, like ice beginning to thaw. She walked back toward the desk, movements less controlled now, more human. She sat down, not behind the desk, but in one of the chairs facing it, and gestured for him to sit as well. People see me as this machine, she said, voice low. Efficient, always on, untouchable, never tired, never uncertain, never needing anything. She looked down at her hands. And I let them because it's easier than explaining that I'm just tired and lonely. And I don't remember the last time someone looked at me like I was a person instead of a position. Marcus sat slowly, setting his laptop bag on the floor, aware that he was crossing some invisible line from contractor to confidant. You asked if you looked happy in that photo. Can I ask you something now? Yes. Did you feel happy? Victoria's breath caught, just slightly. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I felt like myself, like I'd stepped out of this. She gestured at the suit, the office, the carefully constructed image. For 1 hour, I was just a person sitting by a lake. No board meetings, no investor calls, no employees depending on me for their livelihoods. Just me. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly, and asked the question that would echo through everything that came after. Do you think I'm pretty? The words hit Marcus like a physical shock. In 15 years of fixing computers for executives, he'd been yelled at, ignored, treated like furniture that occasionally made helpful noises. But never this. Never asked something so fundamentally human by someone who looked terrified of the answer. His first instinct was to deflect, to hide behind professionalism, to say something polite and meaningless. But Victoria Kane sat there looking at him with an expression that suggested she'd forgotten how to ask real questions and was desperately hoping for a real answer. I think that photo showed someone real, Marcus said slowly. And yeah, that person was beautiful. Not because of how she looked, but because she'd stopped pretending. Because for one moment, she forgot the world was watching and just existed. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She blinked rapidly, trying to control them, clearly unused to crying in front of strangers. One tear escaped, tracking down her cheek before she wiped it away with an almost angry gesture. I'm sorry, this isn't, it's okay. No, it's not. I don't cry, especially not in front of contractors. I'm not going to tell anyone you're human. She laughed, a startled sound that seemed to surprise them both. Thank you for being honest. Most people can't manage that when they're standing in front of me. Marcus thought about Sophie asking him earlier if he had to go, thought about the weight of responsibility that pressed on him every single day, thought about how exhausting it was to always be the strong one. You have that look, he heard himself say. What look? Like you understand what I'm talking about. The loneliness, the exhaustion of always being who everyone needs you to be. Victoria studied him with new intensity. You're not just talking about me. No. Tell me. So Marcus did. Maybe because it was nearly 2 a.m. and exhaustion had worn down his usual defenses. Maybe because Victoria had shown him her vulnerability and it seemed only fair to offer his own. Maybe because sitting in this warm office with rain falling outside, he suddenly wanted someone to know. My wife died 3 years ago. Car accident on I-5. Black ice, wrong place, wrong time. The words came out flat, practiced from having to say them so many times. She was a nurse at Swedish Medical, coming home from a night shift. She never made it. I'm so sorry. I have a daughter, Sophie. She was 5 when it happened. Old enough to understand her mother wasn't coming back. Not old enough to process what that meant. Marcus rubbed his face, feeling 3 years of grief compress into this one moment. I promised Sarah in the hospital that I'd take care of Sophie no matter what. And I have. But taking care means being everything. all the time. Provider, parent, emotional support, stability. I haven't let myself feel much since then. Easier to just work, take care of Sophie, go through motions. But you're right, it's lonely, even when you're not alone. Victoria leaned forward slightly. How old is Sophie now? 8. She's smart, curious, asks questions I don't know how to answer, like why bad things happen to good people, or if I'm ever going to be happy again. What do you tell her? That bad things just happen sometimes, and that I am happy because I have her. Marcus met Victoria's eyes. But she's 8. She knows when I'm lying. They sat in silence for a moment, two lonely people in a tower made of glass and money and carefully controlled image. Outside, rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing the city clean in the way it did every November night. I've never been married, Victoria said finally. I had someone once, 5 years ago. He told me I was emotionally unavailable. He wasn't wrong. She traced a pattern on the arm of her chair. I chose the company over him, told myself it was the right choice, that love was a distraction I couldn't afford, that if I wanted to succeed, I had to sacrifice everything else. Do you still believe that? I don't know anymore. I built this company from nothing. A laptop in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill. Everyone said I'd fail. My father, my investors, every board member who's ever sat across from me with that look that says, cute that you think you can do this. So I worked. 80-hour weeks. 100-hour weeks. I became exactly what they said I couldn't be. She looked at Marcus with an expression that held years of accumulated cost. And now I'm 38 years old, running a $3 billion company, and I'm asking an IT technician if I'm pretty, because you're the first person in 5 years who looked at me like I was human. Marcus felt the weight of that confession, understood the courage it took to admit. You asked if you looked happy in that photo, but can I ask you something else? Yes. Are you happy now? Victoria's face crumpled slightly, then reformed itself into something more controlled. No, I'm successful. I'm powerful. I'm respected. But happy? She shook her head. I think I forgot how to be happy, somewhere between the studio apartment and the 45th floor. They talked for another hour, conversations spiraling through territory neither of them had planned to cover. Victoria told him about her sister's wedding she'd missed for a board meeting in Singapore, about her nephew whose face she only knew from photos, about the plant on her windowsill she kept forgetting to water because she was always somewhere else, thinking about something else, being someone else. Marcus told her about Sophie's nightmares, about the guilt of working nights when she needed him, about the way grief had hollowed him out and left him going through motions rather than actually living. At some point, the conversation shifted from confession to something else. Not quite friendship, not yet, but recognition. Two people who'd built their lives around responsibility and sacrifice, who'd forgotten there was supposed to be more than just duty. Do you ever feel guilty? Victoria asked. For moving forward? Marcus knew she was asking about Sarah. Every day, Sarah told me to find happiness again, but every time I even think about it, I feel like I'm betraying her memory. What would she say if she could see you now? That I'm breaking my promise to her, that surviving isn't the same as living. Victoria nodded slowly. That's the thing about loss, isn't it? It teaches you to protect yourself, to never let anyone close enough to hurt you again. But then you realize you're not protecting yourself. You're just slowly dying in a very safe way. The words hit Marcus somewhere deep. Is that what you're doing? Dying safely? I think so. I think I've been doing it for years without realizing. Marcus glanced at his watch. Nearly 2 in the morning. Sophie would be asleep by now, safe with Mrs. Chen, but he should go anyway. Should stop having this conversation that felt dangerous in ways he couldn't quite articulate. I should let you get back to work. At 2 a.m.? There's nothing to get back to. I was sitting here staring at a broken computer and wondering why I couldn't remember the last time I laughed. Victoria stood and Marcus did the same, both of them aware that something had shifted in this office tonight, something neither of them quite knew how to name. Thank you for fixing the computer. Just doing my job. No, thank you for being honest, for treating me like a person instead of a position. That's rare. That's Marcus picked up his laptop bag, preparing to leave, but Victoria's voice stopped him at the door. Marcus, he turned. I need someone to run a security audit, internal project, comprehensive review of our IT infrastructure. I'd like you to lead it. The words took a moment to register. Ms. Kane, I'm tech support, not a project manager. Call me Victoria, and I know what you are. You're someone who sees things other people miss. You're honest, you're competent. Those qualities are rare at this level. This sounds like a lot of time away from my daughter. Flexible hours, work from home when needed, schedule around Sophie's needs. We'll make it work. Victoria's expression held something between hope and desperation. I'm not asking because you're the best technician in Seattle. I'm asking because I trust you, and I don't trust easily. Marcus felt the weight of the offer, the complexity of it, the way it would change everything. A promotion, better pay, the kind of work he'd left behind 3 years ago when stability mattered more than ambition. But also more time working with Victoria Kane, a woman who'd just shown him her deepest vulnerabilities in the space of 2 hours. A woman who was lonely and tired and desperately trying to remember how to be human. I need to think about it. Of course, take your time. She paused, then added, my wife made me promise something before she died. She said, don't stop living. I've been breaking that promise for 3 years. Maybe it's time to try again. The words came out before Marcus could stop them, surprising him as much as Victoria. Her expression softened into something that looked like understanding, like recognition, like the beginning of hope. Then maybe we both try, she said quietly. Okay, I'll do it. Victoria smiled, genuine and unguarded, the same expression from the photograph by the lake. Good, thank you. Marcus left the office, rode the elevator down through the sleeping building, emerged into rain-soaked Seattle at 2:30 in the morning. His hands were shaking slightly as he drove home, adrenaline or fear or something else he couldn't quite name. The apartment was quiet when he returned. Mrs. Chen had fallen asleep in the armchair, reading lamp still on. He woke her gently, thanked her, saw her to the door. Then he stood in his living room, looking at Sophie's drawing on the refrigerator, that family of 2 with the ghost figure hovering in light pencil. Sophie's door was cracked open the way he'd left it. He pushed it wider and saw her asleep, rabbit clutched in both arms, hair spread across the pillow. She looked peaceful now, nightmares banished for the moment. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of every choice pressing down on his shoulders. He thought about Sarah's last words, about Victoria's question, about the way loneliness had become so familiar he'd stopped noticing it was there. Thought about living versus surviving, about protecting yourself versus dying slowly in a very safe way. Sophie stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open. Daddy? I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep. Did you fix the computer? Yes. Was the lady nice? The question caught him off guard. How did you know it was a lady? Sophie's eyes were already closing again, words coming out sleepy and unfiltered. You have that look, like when you talk about Ma, kind of sad but kind of happy. Children saw everything. Marcus smoothed her hair back from her forehead. She was nice. Good, you should have nice people. Sophie's breathing evened out, sleep reclaiming her. Marcus sat there for a long time, watching his daughter sleep, thinking about nice people and second chances and the courage it took to ask simple questions with complicated answers. Finally, he stood and walked to his own bedroom, exhaustion pulling at him like gravity. His phone buzzed. Email notification at 3 in the morning. He almost didn't check it, but something made him look. From Victoria Kane. Subject line, thank you. Marcus opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. The email was brief. Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said, about breaking promises to yourself. I've been breaking promises too, to the person I used to be. The one in that photo. You saw her, the real me. No one's done that in a very long time. I attached something, not for work, just because I want you to see. One attachment, Lake Tahoe collection, a PDF. Marcus clicked it open. 50 photographs loaded, one after another. Victoria by the lake, Victoria with a woman who must be her sister, Victoria holding a baby and looking awkward but tender, Victoria laughing at something off camera, Victoria asleep in a hammock with a book open on her chest, Victoria being human in all the ways she never got to be in public. The last photo was a selfie, clearly taken by her sister. Both women grinning at the camera, Victoria's arm around her sister's shoulders, happiness unfiltered and real. Marcus stared at the collection for a long time. Then he set his phone down, lay back on his bed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere between fixing a computer and leaving that glass tower, something had happened. Two lonely people had recognized each other, had shown each other the parts they usually kept hidden, had acknowledged that surviving wasn't enough, that there had to be more than just going through motions. He didn't know what came next, didn't know if working together would make things better or infinitely more complicated, didn't know if Sophie was ready for him to be anything other than her constant, stable, predictable father. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus fell asleep thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday, about possibility instead of just obligation, about a woman in a glass tower who'd forgotten how to be human and was desperately trying to remember. Outside, rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing everything clean, making space for whatever came next. 3 weeks became a rhythm Marcus didn't recognize he was building until it had already structured his days. Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoons at Kane Enterprises, sitting across from Victoria in conference rooms that gradually felt less like corporate spaces and more like territories where honesty mattered more than hierarchy. They'd begin with security protocols, network vulnerabilities, system architecture, Nina taking notes with professional efficiency. But Nina always left at 7, her work hours formally complete, and the last 2 hours belonged to something else entirely. The first week they kept conversations tethered to business, both of them pretending the late-night confession hadn't happened. Victoria presented project parameters with CEO precision. Marcus responded with technical assessments. They maintained careful distance, professional boundaries drawn in invisible ink that neither acknowledged nor quite respected. But Tuesday of the second week, Victoria's carefully constructed agenda crumbled when Marcus asked a simple question about employee access protocols, and she'd responded with an entire story about her father. How he'd told her at 18 that women didn't belong in technology, that she should find a nice husband and forget about coding. How she'd taken his words and built them into fuel, working until her eyes burned and her fingers cramped, proving him wrong with every line of code. "He died 5 years ago," Victoria had said, staring at nothing. "Never once told me he was proud. Never once admitted I'd succeeded where he said I'd fail." Marcus had recognized that particular wound, the kind that never quite healed. "My father left when I was 12, just walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. I spent years wondering what I'd done wrong. What was so broken in me that he couldn't stay?" "You were 12? You didn't do anything wrong." Knowing that and believing it are different things. Victoria had looked at him then with an expression that suggested she understood completely, that she carried the same weight of parental rejection dressed in different clothing. After that, the boundaries dissolved faster. By the third week, Marcus stopped pretending these meetings were purely professional. He arrived at Kane Enterprises with Sophie's latest drawing folded in his pocket, Victoria's questions about his daughter having become as routine as technical discussions. He learned that Victoria took her coffee black, but added honey when she thought no one was watching, that she rubbed her left temple when stressed, that she'd memorized every photograph in the Lake Tahoe collection because looking at them reminded her of who she used to be. She learned that Sophie was struggling with long division, that Marcus couldn't cook anything more complex than pasta and scrambled eggs, that he still wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck because taking it off felt like erasing Sarah entirely. They traded vulnerabilities like currency, each confession buying permission for deeper excavation. Thursday evening of the third week, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, helping Sophie with homework, while rice burned on the stove and his phone buzzed with an email from Victoria about encryption protocols. Sophie's pencil moved across paper in careful loops, her concentration absolute as she worked through fractions that seemed designed to frustrate 8-year-olds. "Daddy, who's Victoria?" The question landed without warning. Marcus looked up from his own laptop where he'd been reviewing network diagrams. "Someone I work with." "We, Mom." Sophie didn't look up from her worksheet. You said her name in your sleep last night. Heat crawled up Marcus's neck. I did? Uh-huh. You said Victoria, wait, like she was leaving somewhere. Marcus closed his laptop, giving Sophie his full attention, watching her carefully draw the line between numerator and denominator. Children heard everything, saw everything, processed everything through filters adults had forgotten existed. She's someone I'm working with on a big project for her company. Do you like her? The question was posed with the same casual interest Sophie might use asking about his favorite color. But her pencil had stopped moving, and Marcus knew she was listening with far more intensity than her tone suggested. She's nice, smart, easy to talk to. You smile more now. Sophie finally looked up, her expression serious in the way children get when they're trying to understand adult complexity. Like you used to with Mommy, before. The smoke alarm shrieked as the rice officially crossed from burned to catastrophic. Marcus lunged for the stove, yanking the pot off heat, opening windows while smoke billowed toward the ceiling. Sophie appeared beside him with a dish towel, waving it at the alarm until the noise finally stopped. They stood in his small kitchen, smoke dissipating, rice unsalvageable, both of them slightly out of breath. Pizza? Sophie suggested. Pizza, Marcus agreed. They ordered delivery and ate at the kitchen table with homework scattered between them. Sophie attacked her pepperoni slice with the focus she brought to everything. But Marcus could feel her working up to something, the way she chewed more slowly when thinking hard. Daddy, is it okay if I forget what Mommy's voice sounded like? The question hit him in the chest. Marcus set down his pizza, reaching across the table to take Sophie's hand. Come here, baby. She climbed into his lap despite being almost too big for it, tucking her head under his chin the way she had since she was tiny. Marcus wrapped his arms around her and felt his heart break in all the old familiar ways, plus some new ones he didn't know existed. It's okay to forget some things. Memory fades. That's normal. But I'm trying really hard to remember, and it's getting harder. You know what doesn't fade, though? The love. Mom's love for you, that's in here. He touched her chest over her heart. That doesn't go away, even if you can't remember exactly how her laugh sounded or what she smelled like. Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, do you still love Mommy? Every day, forever. But could you love someone else too? Is there enough room? Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of something, one wrong word capable of pushing them both over. Hearts don't run out of space, sweetheart. They just grow bigger. Loving someone new doesn't make the old love smaller. It just means you are brave enough to try again. Sophie pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face with that unnerving wisdom children sometimes possessed. I think Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me that. Before the accident. She did? We were making cookies and you were at work. She said, if something ever happens to me, you have to take care of Daddy. He's going to be really sad. Help him remember how to smile. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, reporting information rather than seeking comfort. I've been trying, Daddy, but I think you need more than just me. Marcus held his daughter and felt something crack open in his chest, some protective shell he'd built around the possibility of moving forward. Sophie had been carrying this message for 3 years, trying to honor her mother's final request, believing it was her job to make him happy. You make me happy every single day. You know that, right? I know, but you could be happier with nice people like Victoria. The way she said it, so certain, so willing to share him with someone else if it meant he'd stop just surviving, nearly undid him completely. Friday afternoon, Marcus arrived at Kane Enterprises with Sophie's words still echoing in his head. Nina met him in the lobby instead of at Victoria's office, her expression carrying an urgency he hadn't seen before. She's having a day. Board meeting went badly. Investor call was worse. She's been in her office since noon, not answering anyone. Does she want me to come back later? She asked for you specifically, said she needed someone who treated her like a person. Nina pressed the elevator button, her perfectly professional exterior cracking slightly. She's different lately. Lighter. She asked people how their weekends were. She laughed in a staff meeting yesterday. Actually laughed. The elevator arrived and Marcus stepped in, Nina staying behind. It's because of you, isn't it? The IT guy. His name is Marcus. Nina smiled, something genuine beneath the professional mask. I've worked for Victoria for 6 years. I've never seen her look at any way the way she looks at you. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Victoria's office door stood open, but the space felt different than usual, energy compressed and volatile. She stood at the windows with her back to the door, arms wrapped around herself, posture rigid with the kind of control that came from holding everything together by force of will alone. Victoria. She turned and Marcus saw the cracks immediately. Hair slightly disheveled where she'd run her hands through it. Makeup smudged under one eye. The particular exhaustion that came not from lack of sleep, but from too many hours pretending to be invincible. Bad day? The board thinks I'm distracted. They use that exact word, distracted, as if 23 successful quarters in a row and a 30% growth rate mean nothing because I smiled at someone in the hallway. Her voice carried an edge Marcus hadn't heard before. Anger mixed with something that sounded like desperation. What did you tell them? That I'm exploring work-life balance, that burned-out CEOs make bad decisions, that maybe being slightly more human makes me a better leader, not a worse one. She laughed without humor. They looked at me like I'd suggested we all hold hands and sing. Marcus set his laptop bag down and moved closer to the windows, standing beside her rather than across from her. Below, Seattle spread out in afternoon light, the city going about its business while they stood in a glass tower trying to figure out how to be people instead of just functions. Do you think I'm cold? The question came out quiet, almost vulnerable. Marcus looked at Victoria's reflection in the glass rather than directly at her face. Where's this coming from? You asked me yesterday what I do for fun. I couldn't answer. I stood there for 30 seconds trying to remember the last time I did anything just because it brought me joy, and I couldn't. When did that happen? When did I become someone who doesn't know how to have fun? You're different lately, Marcus offered carefully. Lighter. Nina noticed it too. Because of you. Victoria finally turned to face him directly. You walked into my office 3 weeks ago and saw a photograph you weren't supposed to see, and suddenly I can't stop thinking about the woman in that picture. About who I used to be before I decided being successful meant giving up everything else. Maybe you haven't given it up. Maybe you just forgot where you put it. She studied him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. I like you, Marcus, and that terrifies me because I'm not good at this. Every relationship I've ever attempted, I've destroyed. Work always came first. Always. People got tired of being second place to quarterly earnings reports and board presentations. Maybe because work was safer. Safer how? Work doesn't leave you. Work doesn't require vulnerability. Work lets you be in control. Marcus held her gaze. But you're not asking me about work right now. Victoria's breath caught. No, I'm not. They stood in the afternoon light with the entire city spread below them, and Marcus felt the moment crystallize into something that would matter later. He could step back now, retreat behind professional boundaries, keep Sophie safe from any potential fallout. Or he could step forward into uncertainty and risk in the possibility that Victoria Kane might be worth all of it. Can we talk? Victoria's voice came out softer. Outside the office, not about work. When? Tomorrow. There's a place I want to show you. She hesitated, then added, bring Sophie. The words rearranged everything. This wasn't a professional dinner or a business discussion. This was Victoria choosing to meet the most important person in his life, acknowledging that moving forward meant including an 8-year-old girl who'd already lost too much. Are you sure? No, I'm terrified, but I want to meet her anyway. Marcus spent Friday evening explaining to Sophie that Victoria wanted to meet her, watching his daughter's face cycle through surprise, curiosity, and something that looked like cautious hope. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold, one of those November days when Seattle remembered it was supposed to have blue skies occasionally. Sophie changed outfits 3 times before settling on her favorite purple sweater, the one Sarah had bought her the Christmas before she died. Victoria picked them up at 10 in her Tesla, and Marcus watched Sophie's eyes go wide at the car's sleek lines and silent electric motor. She climbed into the back seat with careful reverence, treating the leather interior like something precious and slightly magical. Wow, this is like a spaceship. Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror, her expression nervous in ways Marcus suspected she rarely let anyone see. It's just a car, but thank you. Daddy says you're really smart. Your daddy's pretty smart too. He fixes computers. What do you do? Victoria pulled into traffic, hands precise on the wheel. I run a company, but honestly, your dad's job is more impressive. He actually makes things work. I just sit in meetings and pretend to know what everyone's talking about. Sophie giggled, some of her initial shyness dissolving. They drove north through Seattle toward Discovery Park, conversation flowing easier than Marcus had dared hope. Sophie asked questions with the relentless curiosity of 8-year-olds, and Victoria answered with an honesty that suggested she'd forgotten to put on her CEO armor this morning. Discovery Park sprawled across 534 acres of forest and meadow, Seattle's largest park offering trails that wound through trees toward beaches on Puget Sound. Victoria parked near the south entrance, and they walked together, Sophie between them, chattering about school and her friend Emma, who had a loose tooth, and how Mrs. Chen's cat had kittens last week. The trail opened onto a beach where driftwood logs lay scattered like fallen giants, smooth and salt-bleached. Sophie ran ahead, investigating tidal pools with the focus of a scientist, while Marcus and Victoria found a log to sit on, watching her dart between rocks. She's wonderful. She is. Smart, curious, asks about 1,000 questions a day. She looks like you. Same eyes. She has Sarah's smile, though, and her kindness. Victoria watched Sophie hold up a starfish for their inspection, the creature deep purple against her small hands. She's been through a lot. We both have. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between people who'd stopped performing for each other. Gulls called overhead, waves rushed against stones, Sophie's laughter carried on cold wind. Marcus, I need to be honest about something. He turned to look at her, seeing vulnerability written across features usually so controlled. Okay, I'm terrified. Of this, of us, of what's happening between us. I don't know how to do relationships. I don't know how to let someone matter without sabotaging it. I've spent 15 years building walls, and I don't know if I know how to take them down. I'm scared too. Of what? Of moving on, of dishonoring Sarah's memory, of teaching Sophie that love is something you do once and then never risk again. Marcus picked up a smooth stone, turning it in his hands. But I'm more scared of staying frozen for the rest of my life, of showing Sophie that the safe choice is always the right choice, that protecting yourself matters more than being alive. What if I fail? What if I hurt you or Sophie? What if you don't? What if this is exactly what we both need? Victoria's eyes filled with tears that she didn't try to hide. I haven't cried in 10 years before I met you. Now I seem to cry every other day. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it means you're feeling again. Sophie ran back carrying 3 shells, sand coating her purple sneakers, cheeks flushed from cold and excitement. Look, 3 perfect ones, one for each of us. She handed them out with ceremony, placing one in Marcus's palm, one in Victoria's, keeping the third for herself. We can be like a collection, things that go together. Marcus watched Victoria's face transform. Watched her look at Sophie with an expression that suggested something was breaking open inside her chest. She closed her fingers around the shell, holding it like Sophie had just given her something infinitely precious. I'd like that very much. They stayed at the beach until Sophie's enthusiasm for tidal pools had exhausted itself, then walked back through trails where trees filtered afternoon light into golden patterns. Sophie held Victoria's hand without prompting, chattering about her drawing class and how she'd learned to shade with charcoal. I could teach you, if you want. Drawing is easy once you know the tricks. Victoria glanced at Marcus over Sophie's head, her expression suggesting she was feeling things she didn't quite know how to name. I'd like that. They drove back through the city as day tilted toward evening, Sophie falling asleep in the back seat with exhaustion from running and exploring. Victoria pulled up outside Marcus's apartment building and turned off the engine, both of them sitting in the sudden silence. Can I ask you something? Victoria kept her voice low so as not to wake Sophie. Always. Will you have dinner with me? Just us. A real date. Not work. Not the park with Sophie. Just us, being people instead of responsibilities. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the line, the moment when maybe became definitely, when careful became committed. He thought about Sarah's last words, about Sophie's blessing, about the way loneliness had become so familiar he'd stopped recognizing it as a choice. Yes, I'm going to mess this up. Probably multiple times. I'm going to work too much and forget to call and make you second place to earnings reports. I'm going to be exactly who I've always been. So will I. I'll be overprotective and worried and probably terrible at knowing when to prioritize you versus Sophie. I'll retreat when things get hard and use her as an excuse to avoid vulnerability. Victoria reached across the console, taking his hand. Her fingers were cold, her grip uncertain but determined. But you'll be patient with me? Victoria, I'll be whatever you need me to be. Patient, understanding, present, because you're worth it. All of it. The mess and the fear and the complicated reality of building something real. She leaned across the space between them, and Marcus met her halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, testing whether this was real or just another late-night confession that would evaporate in daylight. Her hand came up to touch his face, fingers trembling slightly, and he deepened the kiss, tasting salt from earlier tears and hope that neither of them had allowed themselves in years. They broke apart slowly, foreheads touching, both breathing harder than the kiss warranted. In the back seat, Sophie slept on, oblivious to the adults rearranging their entire future in the front seat. I'm falling in love with you, Victoria whispered, and it terrifies me. Good, be terrified together. She laughed, shaky but genuine. When did you become wise? About 3 weeks ago when a woman asked me if she was pretty, and I realized I'd been half alive for 3 years. Victoria kissed him again, this time with more certainty, more commitment to the risk they were both taking. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her head on his shoulder, her walls down completely, vulnerability on full display. What happens now? Marcus looked at Sophie sleeping in the back seat, at Victoria curved against him, at the future opening up in ways he'd stopped letting himself imagine. Now we figure it out, one day at a time, messily and imperfectly and together. Can we? We can try. That's all anyone does. Victoria lifted her head to look at him, mascara smudged, hair disheveled, more beautiful than any CEO portrait could capture. My board thinks I'm distracted. Maybe they're right, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you fixed my computer, about what it would feel like to have someone in my life who sees me instead of just seeing what I can provide. You're not a resource to be managed. You're allowed to want things for yourself. I want you, and Sophie, and the possibility of being happy instead of just successful. Then let's be brave together. Sophie stirred in the back seat, eyes fluttering open. Are we home? We're home, Marcus confirmed. He carried Sophie upstairs while Victoria followed, and at his apartment door, she kissed him once more, quick and soft and full of promise. Thursday, dinner, a real date with no work talk and no interruptions. Just us figuring out what this is. I'll be there. Victoria touched his face one more time, then turned and walked down the hallway, looking back once before disappearing around the corner. Marcus carried Sophie inside, tucked her into bed with her shell on the nightstand, and stood at his kitchen window, looking out at Seattle lights. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Thank you for today, for letting me meet Sophie, for making me believe in second chance, for seeing me. Marcus typed back. Thank you for being brave enough to ask if you were pretty. Everything changed in that moment. He went to bed that night thinking about Victoria's laugh at the beach, about Sophie's easy acceptance, about the way terror and hope felt remarkably similar when you were falling in love again after believing you never would. Outside his window, the city hummed with life, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt like he was part of that pulse instead of just existing beside it. Sarah had told him not to stop living. He'd kept that promise, finally. Not because he'd forgotten her, never that, but because he'd learned something crucial. Hearts didn't have to choose between grief and joy. They could hold both, could honor the past while embracing the future. Sarah would have liked Victoria, would have loved watching Sophie have another person to love her. That knowledge settled something deep in Marcus's chest, gave him permission he hadn't known he needed. Monday morning, he arrived at Kane Enterprises for their usual meeting and found Victoria waiting with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested she'd been counting minutes until he arrived. They sat across from each other, reviewing security protocols, but their feet touched under the table, hands brushed when passing documents, and when Nina left at 7, the real conversation began. "Sophie drew a new picture yesterday," Marcus said, pulling it from his bag. "She wanted me to give this to you." The drawing showed 3 figures at a beach, identifiable by Sophie's careful labeling. Daddy, me, Victoria, all holding shells, all smiling, all colored in with the bright optimism only children could manage. Victoria stared at the drawing for a long moment, then pressed it to her chest. "Can I keep this?" "She made it for you. I'm going to put it on my desk, right here where I can see it every day. Your board will ask questions. Let them. I'm done pretending to be a machine they can wind up and send into battle. I'm a person who's falling in love with a man and his brilliant daughter. If they don't like that, they can find themselves a new CEO." Marcus felt something settle in his chest, some final piece clicking into place. They were doing this, actually doing this, building something real out of midnight confessions and beach walks, and the willingness to be terrified together. Thursday's dinner happened at a small Italian place in Capitol Hill, the kind with checked tablecloths and candles and wine bottles and servers who'd worked there for decades. Victoria wore jeans, which Marcus had never seen before, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, lighter, like the woman from the Lake Tahoe photograph was finally allowed to exist in daylight. They talked for 3 hours, not about work, not about obligations, just about themselves. Victoria told stories about her sister's wedding she'd missed, about her nephew whose laugh made her believe in joy again, about the moment she'd almost sold Kane Enterprises because she couldn't remember why she was fighting so hard. Marcus told her about meeting Sarah in college, about their plans for a future that never came, about the specific shade of guilt that came from being alive when someone you loved wasn't. "Do you feel guilty?" Victoria asked. "About this." "Us." "Sometimes, but then I remember what Sarah said, that Sophie needed a happy father, not just a present one. That love wasn't a finite resource I'd used up." Marcus reached across the table, taking Victoria's hand. "She would have liked you, would have appreciated how you show up for Sophie, even though you're terrified of getting it wrong." "I am terrified. I don't know how to be anyone's almost stepmother. I barely know how to be a person outside my office." Then we learned together, messily and imperfectly and without any guarantees except that we keep showing up. Victoria squeezed his hand. "Deal." They walked back to her car through Capitol Hill streets, hand in hand, and Marcus felt the future opening up in ways he'd stopped letting himself imagine. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. Complicated and scary, and worth every moment of uncertainty. 3 months after their first date, Marcus had learned the specific architecture of Victoria's mornings. Coffee at 5:30, emails until 7, workouts she frequently skipped when work called, arrival at Kane Enterprises by 8. He'd also learned that she kept Sophie's beach shell in her jacket pocket, that she texted him during board meetings when she needed grounding, that she'd started leaving work at 6 instead of 9, and seemed almost proud of the rebellion. The rhythm they'd built felt intentional rather than accidental now. Mondays, Sophie had art class, so Victoria picked her up and brought her to Marcus's apartment, where they'd attempt dinner with varying degrees of success. Wednesdays, Marcus worked late at Kane Enterprises, while Victoria helped Sophie with homework over video call, both of them solving math problems Marcus had struggled with hours earlier. Fridays belonged to all 3 of them. Pizza and movies, and Sophie falling asleep between the adults who'd become her safe anchors. Week 4 brought Sophie's school play, a production of The Wizard of Oz, where Sophie played Munchkin number 7, with the kind of commitment most adults brought to their careers. Victoria arrived 30 minutes early to claim front row seats, setting up her phone with the intensity she usually reserved for product launches. Marcus slid into the seat beside her and watched her fidget with nervous energy. She's going to be great. What if she forgets her lines? What if she trips? What if... Then she'll recover and keep going. She's tougher than you think. Victoria reached for his hand. I've never done this before. The parent thing at school events. What if I'm not doing it right? You showed up. That's all that matters. The play unfolded with the particular chaos that came from 25 children trying to remember blocking and lines simultaneously. Sophie delivered her 3 lines with perfect diction, and when she spotted Victoria in the audience, her entire face transformed into pure joy. She waved, breaking character completely, and the adults waved back without caring about theatrical protocol. Afterwards, Sophie ran to them still wearing her Munchkin costume, green tulle dress, and striped stockings, practically vibrating with excitement. You came, both of you. Did you see me? Did I do good? Victoria crouched down to Sophie's level. You were brilliant, professional level performance. I only had 3 lines. But you delivered them perfectly, and your costume was the best one on that stage. Sophie threw her arms around Victoria's neck in a hug that caught them both off guard. Victoria's arms came up slowly, carefully, holding Sophie like she was something precious and breakable. Over Sophie's shoulder, her eyes met Marcus's, and he saw everything she wasn't saying. Gratitude and wonder, and the overwhelming responsibility of mattering this much to a child. When they got home that evening, Sophie was still buzzing with post-performance energy. She made them watch the video Victoria had recorded 3 times, providing commentary on each viewing about what she'd done right and what she'd improve for the next performance. Marcus made popcorn while Victoria sat on the couch with Sophie, explaining theatrical techniques she'd apparently researched specifically for this conversation. So method acting means you become the character? Like really believe you're a munchkin? Exactly. You have to find the truth in the character, even if the character is small and fictional. That's so cool. You know a lot about theater. I researched it because you care about it, and I want to understand the things you care about. Sophie studied Victoria with that intensity children deployed when evaluating adult sincerity. You really care about my stuff. Of course I do. Your stuff is important. My dad's last girlfriend didn't care about my stuff. She said plays were boring. Marcus froze in the kitchen, popcorn forgotten. He hadn't realized Sophie remembered Jennifer, the brief relationship he'd attempted a year after Sarah died that had lasted exactly 6 weeks before imploding spectacularly. He'd thought Sophie had been too young to notice or care. Victoria's expression shifted into something protective. Well, she was wrong. Plays aren't boring. And anyone who thinks 8-year-olds aren't interesting isn't worth your dad's time. I told Daddy that, but he said I was being mean. You were being honest. There's a difference. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her popcorn. Marcus caught Victoria's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She shrugged like it was nothing, but they both knew it wasn't. She just navigated complicated territory about past relationships, in Sophie's opinions, without making anyone feel wrong or defensive. Week 6, Victoria cooked dinner successfully for the first time. Real cooking, not just reheating takeout or assembling sandwiches. She'd spent her lunch hour watching YouTube tutorials about pasta sauce, and she arrived at Marcus's apartment with bags of fresh ingredients and determination written across her face. I'm doing this. No more burning things. No more setting off smoke alarms. Sophie appointed herself sous chef, carefully measuring ingredients under Victoria's supervision, while Marcus watched from the doorway, his heart doing complicated things. The kitchen was too small for 3 people, and they kept bumping into each other, laughing at the chaos. And when the sauce actually turned out properly cooked, Victoria had looked so genuinely proud that Sophie gave her a standing ovation. They ate at Marcus's small table, sauce on Sophie's chin, garlic bread slightly too crispy but edible, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift. This wasn't visiting anymore. This was family, messy and imperfect and real. Can we do this every week? Sophie asked through a mouthful of pasta. What, cook together? Be together like this, all the time, not just sometimes. Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances over Sophie's head. They'd been dancing around this question for weeks, both knowing where they were heading, but neither quite ready to name it out loud. Would you like that? Victoria asked carefully. If we were together all the time? Duh, obviously. Sophie rolled her eyes with the exasperation only children could muster. You're already like family. Might as well make it official. Week 8 brought a conversation Marcus hadn't expected. Victoria arrived at his apartment with takeout and an expression that suggested she'd been rehearsing words all day. Sophie was at a sleepover, the apartment unusually quiet, and they sat on his couch with Chinese food growing cold between them. I hired a COO, Chief Operating Officer, someone to run daily operations. Marcus set down his lo mein. That's significant. The board's been suggesting it for years. They were thrilled when I finally agreed. She picked at her food without eating. But I didn't do it for them. Why did you do it? Because I want to leave work at reasonable hours, be present for school plays and homework and dinners that don't come from takeout containers. She met his eyes with a directness he'd come to recognize meant she was being completely honest. I want to build a life with you and Sophie. Actually build it, not just visit it when my schedule allows. And I can't do that working 16-hour days. This is a big change for you. It's the right change. I've been CEO for 15 years. I've proven everything I needed to prove. Now I want to prove I can be more than just successful. I want to prove I can be present. Marcus pulled her closer. You're already present. Sophie sees that. I see that. But I want to be more present. I want to be someone who makes it to every school play, not just the big ones. Someone who knows what homework is due without having to ask. Someone who lives with you instead of just visiting. The weight of that landed between them. Marcus thought about his lease expiring in 2 months, about Sophie's questions about when Victoria would move in, about the future opening up in ways he'd stopped letting himself imagine. Are you proposing we move in together? I'm proposing we build something permanent, together, in a place that belongs to all of us, not just me or just you. She pulled out her tablet, pulling up photos she'd clearly been waiting to show him. I found a house. Week 10, they told Sophie about the house. Victoria had brought her tablet with photos already queued, and Sophie studied each image with the seriousness she brought to important decisions. Marcus watched his daughter evaluate their potential future home, pointing out features that mattered to 8-year-olds. Windows in the bedroom for reading light, kitchen big enough for 3 people to cook without bumping into each other constantly, backyard for the vegetable garden she'd been planning since summer. What about pets? Can we have a dog? Victoria glanced at Marcus. Eventually, yes, after we're settled. Like a puppy or a rescue dog? Because rescue dogs need homes more. Rescue dogs are perfect. We'll look at shelters after we move. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer. Okay, I approve the house. When do we move? House closes in January. We'd move in February. And I can paint my room purple? Whatever color you want. Purple. Definitely purple. Sophie studied the photos again. This is going to be our house, like for real, all 3 of us living there together. If that's okay with you. Sophie looked up from the tablet with an expression far older than 8. It's okay with me. It's what I've been wanting since you showed up. I just didn't know if I was allowed to ask. Marcus felt his throat tighten. You're always allowed to ask for what you want, Soph. I know, but I didn't want you to feel bad if you couldn't give it to me. Like when I wanted Mom back and you couldn't make that happen. She turned to Victoria. But this I can have, right? You're staying? Victoria's composure cracked slightly, but she held it together, her voice steady when she answered. I'm staying, for as long as you'll have me. That's a promise. Week 12 arrived with December's particular brand of Seattle rain. Sophie had been secretive for days, hiding something under her bed, whispering into her phone when she thought Marcus wasn't listening, radiating the specific energy that came from planning surprises adults weren't supposed to know about. Monday morning before school, she presented Marcus with a carefully wrapped package decorated with her own elaborate drawings of butterflies and stars and shells. For Victoria, don't look at it. Give it to her tonight. It's really important, Daddy. Like, the most important thing I've ever made important. That evening, Marcus brought the package to Kane Enterprises for their standing Monday meeting. Nina had long since stopped chaperoning, just smiled knowingly when he arrived and left them to their own territory. Victoria looked exhausted, 4th consecutive day of investor presentations having apparently drained something fundamental. Rough day? Long day. Different category. She gestured at the familiar chair, and he sat, sliding the wrapped package across her desk. What's this? Sophie made you something. Explicit instructions that I'm not allowed to see at first. She said it's the most important thing she's ever made. Victoria unwrapped it with the care she brought to everything involving Sophie, preserving paper that had clearly taken hours to decorate. Inside was a framed drawing, professional level work that showed months of development beyond anything Sophie had done before. 3 figures at a beach, detailed and shaded with real artistic skill, each person distinct and recognizable and happy. The composition showed genuine talent, each figure positioned to show connection without crowding. At the bottom, in Sophie's careful printing, my family, Daddy, me, Victoria. Victoria stared at it for 30 seconds while Marcus watched emotions cycle across her face too fast to catalog. Her fingers traced the glass over each figure, lingering on the one labeled Victoria. And when she finally looked up, tears were streaming down her face without any attempt to hide them. She put me in her family. The words came out choked. She drew me into her family like I belong there. Like it's not even a question. Marcus moved around the desk, pulling her into his arms. You do belong there. Sophie decided that months ago. She's just making it official now. But what if I mess up? What if I fail her? Then you'll apologize and try again. That's what family does. We mess up and we keep trying anyway because loving each other matters more than being perfect. He tilted her face up. You're already enough, Victoria. You show up. You care. You try. That's all any parent does. She pulled back to look at the drawing again, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm putting this on my desk, right here where everyone can see it. Where the board members and investors and everyone who walks through that door knows that I'm not just a CEO. I'm someone's family. They'll have opinions. I don't care about their opinions anymore. I care about Sophie, about you, about this. She positioned the frame carefully on her desk, angling it so she'd see it every time she looked up from her computer. This matters more than any deal I've ever closed, any presentation I've ever given. This is what success actually looks like. Marcus stayed while she found the perfect spot, adjusting the angle 3 times before she was satisfied. When she finally stepped back to admire it, her entire demeanor had shifted into something calmer, more grounded, like Sophie's drawing had given her permission to be something other than relentlessly professional. I need to see her, need to tell her what this means. She's home. Mrs. Chen's watching her. We could go now. They drove through December rain to Marcus's apartment, where Sophie was supposedly doing homework, but was actually watching cartoons with Mrs. Chen, gently snoring in the armchair. Sophie's face lit up when she saw Victoria, and before anyone could speak, she'd launched herself into Victoria's arms with the absolute trust only children possessed. Did you like it? I worked on it forever. Emma's sister helped me with the shading technique, but I did all the drawing myself. Victoria held her carefully. It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. Really? More beautiful than all your CEO awards? More beautiful than anything in my entire life. Because it means you see me as family, that you want me to be part of your family, and that's worth more than any award ever could be. Sophie pulled back to study Victoria's face, checking for sincerity with that evaluating intensity children deployed when adult emotions ran high. So you're happy about it? Not just being nice? I'm happy about it. So happy I cried at work, which I never do. You cried, like real crying? Real crying. Your dad had to hug me until I stopped. Sophie looked at Marcus for confirmation, and he nodded. Satisfied with this verification, Sophie wrapped her arms around Victoria's neck again. Good, because I want you to be in our family for real, not just as Daddy's girlfriend who comes over sometimes. As someone who lives with us and is there all the time. Victoria's voice came out thick with emotion. I want that too, more than anything. I want to be in your family, if you'll have me. Not just as someone who visits sometimes, but really in it. As someone who stays. Sophie studied Victoria's face with that unnerving intensity. Will you leave, like people do sometimes? The question hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus knew Sophie was thinking about Jennifer, about Sarah, about every person who'd been present and then suddenly wasn't. Children remembered loss in ways adults forgot they did. Victoria took a slow breath before answering, choosing honesty over platitudes. I'm going to try really hard to stay. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, because I probably will. I'm new at this family thing. But I can promise that I care about you very much, and I want to be here for school plays and homework and boring regular days. I want to be someone you can count on. Sophie considered this for a long moment, her 8-year-old brain processing adult promises and their inherent limitations. Then, okay, but if you're going to be in our family for real, you should probably learn to cook better. Because Daddy's really bad at it, and we can't eat takeout forever. The tension broke into laughter. Mrs. Chen woke up, assessed the situation with her usual efficiency, and announced she was leaving them to their family business. After she left, Sophie returned to Victoria with a seriousness that suggested the real question was just arriving. If you're in our family, what do I call you? Victoria seems weird if you're like my mom now. Victoria looked at Marcus, seeking permission or guidance or both. He nodded slightly, leaving it to Victoria to navigate this complicated territory. That's completely up to you, sweetheart. I could be your friend Victoria, or just Victoria, or if you wanted, eventually you could call me Mom, but only if it feels right to you. There's no rush, no pressure. You get to decide what feels comfortable. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. Sophie seemed satisfied with that answer. She retrieved her homework and spread it across the kitchen table, working through fractions while the adults sat nearby, not quite believing this was real. This collection of ordinary moments adding up to something extraordinary. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed with the drawings frame visible on her nightstand where she could see it from her pillow, Marcus and Victoria stood at his small kitchen window looking at rain-soaked Seattle. She leaned against him with a kind of comfortable weight that came from months of choosing each other. 4 months ago, I was standing in my office, wondering why I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed. Her voice carried wonder rather than sadness. Wondering if selling everything and disappearing somewhere anonymous would make me feel human again. What changed? You walked in to fix my computer and saw a photograph you weren't supposed to see. Asked me if I'd been happy in that moment. She turned to face him. I realized I'd forgotten what happy felt like, what being a person instead of a position felt like. You gave me permission to want more than just success. Marcus traced her face with his fingers, memorizing contours he'd come to know better than his own. You're different now, from that first night. How? Lighter, surer, like you've stopped apologizing for wanting ordinary things. Like you've accepted that being human isn't weakness. I have accepted that. I spent 15 years building walls to protect myself from needing anyone. Turns out tearing those walls down was the bravest thing I ever did. Scarier than any board meeting, any investor pitch, any business decision I've ever made. You're not scared anymore, though. No, not scared, just certain now. I know what I want. This family, this life, regular dinners and homework help and snow days. I'm ready to be someone's mother, your partner, a person who prioritizes presence over productivity. Marcus pulled her closer. Sophie's giving you permission. In her own way, that's what tonight was about. I know, and I'm not going to waste it. She looked up at him with an intensity that matched the woman who'd asked if she was pretty 4 months ago. But this time the vulnerability came from a place of strength rather than desperation. I love you. I love Sophie. I want to build something permanent with you, not just visit your life when my schedule allows. We're already building it. Every dinner, every homework session, every school play. We're already family. Then let's make it official. Let's move into that house and paint Sophie's room purple and adopt a rescue dog and be insufferably domestic and normal. Christmas morning arrived 3 weeks later with rare Seattle snow transforming the city into something magical and temporary. Victoria had invited them to her penthouse for the holiday, and Marcus drove through empty streets at 7 in the morning with Sophie vibrating with excitement in the back seat, her carefully wrapped presents for Victoria taking up the entire seat beside her. Do you think she'll like what I made her? She's going to love it. But what if she doesn't? What if it's not good enough? Marcus glanced in the rear-view mirror at his daughter's anxious face. Soph, Victoria loves everything you make. She kept that macaroni necklace you gave her and wore it to a board meeting. She did? She did. Nina sent me a photo. Sophie subsided, satisfied with this evidence of Victoria's commitment to their relationship. They pulled into the parking garage of Victoria's building, and Sophie practically vibrated out of the car in her eagerness to get upstairs. Victoria's penthouse had been transformed from sterile showpiece into something that looked like people actually lived there. Christmas tree in the corner with the lights Sophie had helped string 2 weeks earlier. Stockings hung on a decorative ladder since Victoria didn't have a fireplace. 3 stockings bearing their names in silver glitter. Marcus, Sophie, Victoria. Sophie noticed immediately. "You got me a stocking with my name and everything." "Of course, you're part of this Christmas, part of everything now." Victoria crouched down to Sophie's level, and Marcus watched her move with the kind of natural ease that had taken months to develop. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." "Merry Christmas, Mom." The word landed in sudden silence. Victoria froze, Sophie looked slightly nervous, and Marcus held his breath, waiting to see what happened next. "You can call me that?" Victoria's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I thought about it like you said, and it feels right, if that's okay with you." Victoria pulled Sophie into a hug so tight Marcus worried briefly about oxygen, but Sophie just wrapped her arms around Victoria's neck and held on. When they finally pulled apart, both of them had tears on their faces and matching smiles. "It's more than okay. It's perfect." They opened presents on the floor, wrapping paper accumulating in cheerful case, everyone still in pajamas, because Victoria had insisted this was how real families did Christmas. Sophie gave Victoria the clay butterfly she'd made in art class, imperfect and sincere, and clearly made with enormous care. Victoria held it like Sophie had handed her something infinitely precious, turning it to catch the light from different angles. "This is perfect. It's kind of lopsided. That's what makes it perfect. It's real, made by real hands that care about me." She set it carefully on the coffee table where she could see it. "I'm going to put this on my office windowsill, right where the morning light hits it." Sophie beamed and moved on to her own presents with the particular enthusiasm 8-year-olds brought to Christmas morning. Victoria had gotten her a professional art set with pencils and pastels and paper so thick it felt expensive. Marcus had gotten her books she'd been requesting for months, and Victoria had added a few he hadn't known about, proving she'd been paying attention to Sophie's evolving interests. Victoria gave Marcus a framed photograph from Lake Tahoe, the one he'd taken of her and Sophie in the water, both of them laughing with abandon. He stared at it for a long moment, feeling something fundamental shift in his chest. "This is who you are now. Who I want to be. Who I am when I'm with you and Sophie. Real instead of performed." After presents came breakfast, which they made together with varying degrees of competence. Victoria burned the pancakes despite Marcus's careful instructions, and Sophie declared them crispy in a good way while drowning them in syrup and in butter. They ate at Victoria's dining table with Seattle spread below them, snow falling gently outside floor-to-ceiling windows. And Marcus watched his daughter and this woman he loved discuss whether snowmen had feelings, and something in him settled completely. After breakfast, Victoria pulled up the house photos on her tablet one more time. "We haven't made it official yet. Sophie, do you want to see the house again before we finalize everything?" Sophie studied each photo with renewed interest now that she'd called Victoria Mom and made it real. She pointed out features that mattered. Good reading light in the bedroom. Kitchen big enough for 3 people to cook without constant collisions. Backyard perfect for vegetables and eventually a dog. "When do we move?" "February. After the house closes and we have time to paint your room." "Purple." "Purple are, Victoria agreed. "Whatever shade you want. We'll go to the paint store together and you pick." Sophie nodded, satisfied with this level of control over her domain. "And then we get a dog?" "After we're settled. After we've proven we can keep ourselves and each other alive consistently." "Deal." Sophie studied Victoria with that evaluating intensity. "So if we all live in this house together, and I call you Mom, Does that mean we're a real family now? Like official? The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances, both understanding what Sophie was really asking. Would this arrangement stick? Or would it fall apart like so many other things in her young life had fallen apart? Victoria set down her coffee and gave Sophie her full attention. We're a real family, official as it gets. Moving into a house together, building a life together, choosing each other every single day. That's what family is. Even though you're not married, even though we're not married, family isn't about paperwork. It's about showing up and caring and being there through boring, regular days and exciting special days and everything in between. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer. She returned to studying house photos, planning her purple room with the focus she brought to all her important projects. They spent the afternoon at Volunteer Park, the three of them making snow angels and building a snowman that leaned dramatically, but Sophie declared perfect anyway. Marcus watched Victoria help Sophie pack snow with focused intensity, both of them completely absorbed in the project, and he felt the future crystallize into something tangible and certain and real. Other families played nearby, children shrieking with joy, parents calling warnings about eating snow or getting too cold. Marcus stood slightly apart, watching his family integrate seamlessly into the landscape of normal holiday activities, and felt gratitude so intense it was almost painful. "Daddy, come help. We need more snow for the body." He joined them and they built their snowman together, giving it arms made from branches Sophie collected and a face made from rocks Victoria found. They stood back to admire their work, and Sophie declared it the best snowman in the entire park, and neither adult contradicted her because it probably was. Evening arrived too quickly, the way holidays always did. They returned to Victoria's penthouse for dinner, leftovers from breakfast reheated with more success than the original cooking. Sophie fell asleep on the couch before dessert, exhausted from snow and excitement and the emotional weight of rearranging her family structure. Marcus carried her to the guest room Victoria had prepared, tucking her in with her new art supplies arranged on the nightstand. When he returned to the living room, Victoria had changed into comfortable clothes, hair down, makeup gone, looking more like the woman from the Lake Tahoe photograph every day. She'd moved to the windows where they'd stood that morning, looking out at Seattle's transformed landscape. "Come here." He joined her and they stood together, watching snow fall on a city that rarely saw it, both understanding this day had been about more than presents and snowmen. This had been about Sophie giving permission, about Victoria accepting responsibility, about all of them choosing to build something permanent from temporary moments. "She called me Mom." Victoria's voice carried wonder and disbelief in equal measure. "She did. I never thought I'd be someone's mom. Never let myself imagine it because it seemed impossible for someone like me." "Someone like you?" "Someone who chose work over everything else for 15 years. Someone who couldn't even keep a planet alive. Someone who forgot how to be human." She turned to face him. "But Sophie sees something in me worth calling Mom, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that word." Marcus pulled her closer. "You're already worthy. You've been worthy since the day you showed up to her school play and filmed the whole thing like it was a TED Talk." She laughed, the sound mixing with unshed tears. "I was so nervous that day. Terrified I'd do something wrong, say something wrong, be obviously terrible at this whole parenting thing. But you weren't. You were present. That's all Sophie needs, someone who shows up." "I'm not scared anymore." Victoria's voice carried a certainty he hadn't heard before. "Not scared, just certain. I know what I want now, this family, this life, regular dinners and homework help and snow days and all the boring, beautiful, normal things I thought I'd never have. You've changed. These past months, you've become surer, stronger in ways that have nothing to do with boardrooms. I've learned something important, that tearing down walls is braver than building them. That vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the only way to build something real." She looked up at him. "You taught me that. You and Sophie both. You taught me that being human is more important than being successful. That presence matters more than productivity. That love is worth more than any quarterly earnings report. You taught us something too, that it's possible to build a family from broken pieces." that second chances are real, that love doesn't require perfection, just presence. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between people who'd stopped performing for each other. Below, Seattle hummed with its usual energy, millions of people pursuing their own complicated stories. Up here, in a glass tower that would soon be left behind for something better, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances held each other and believed completely in the future they were building. 6 months ago, you asked me if you were pretty, Marcus said quietly. Tonight I'm asking you, are you happy? Victoria smiled, and the expression transformed her entire face into something radiant and unguarded. Happier than I knew was possible. Happier than I thought I deserved. Just happy. Completely, ordinarily, wonderfully happy. They went to bed that night with Sophie safe in the next room and plans for tomorrow already taking shape. The house would close in January. They'd move in February. Sophie's room would be painted purple by March. By summer, maybe they'd talk about that dog Sophie wanted. Small steps building toward a future that felt both extraordinary and wonderfully ordinary. Marcus lay awake for a while after Victoria fell asleep, listening to her breathe, thinking about midnight confessions and beach shells and 8-year-olds who drew families that included new members. Thinking about how sometimes the bravest thing you could do was ask a simple question with a complicated answer. And sometimes the bravest thing was answering honestly. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that question changed everything. Victoria had asked if she was pretty. He'd said yes, and you're real. From that midnight moment, they'd built something neither had believed possible. A family forged not from perfection, but from the courage to be imperfectly, beautifully human. A family built from loneliness and loss and the willingness to risk everything again after already losing so much. The story had begun with a broken computer and a photograph seen by accident. It continued with honest conversations in glass towers and beach walks where shells became promises. And now it moved forward with purple bedrooms and burned pancakes and the ordinary magic of family dinners where everyone belonged. Not perfect, never perfect, just real and present and worth every moment of fear it took to get here. Worth every wall torn down, every vulnerability exposed, every risk taken in the name of building something that mattered more than success or safety or any of the careful protections people built to keep themselves from getting hurt. Sometimes love found you at midnight when you'd stopped looking. Sometimes it looked like a woman who'd forgotten how to be human asking if she was pretty. Sometimes it looked like having the courage to say yes, you're beautiful because you're real. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to keep showing up even when uncertain, it looked like Christmas morning with snow falling and a child calling you mom and knowing with absolute certainty that you were exactly where you belonged.